Here's something that's really cool. We can actually see what this will look like. Oh, look it placed it right there. I can use my finger, I can drag it around, move it around. Now, I'm a maker who likes to work in all different mediums. I like woodworking, I like metalworking, I like leatherworking. I make knives, I work on cars, motorbikes, a lot of stuff. And I have found that the 3D printer has been incredibly useful. So if you are a maker, someone who likes to do things with their hands, should you get a 3D printer? Let's just start out with some of the cool and useful things that I've done. Tool organization is a huge thing for me. I like my tools to be accessible and organized. And regardless of what brand you have, you can find all sorts of really handy tool holders that you can just download for free and print. These ones just mimic the battery, and I add them to my French cleat wall. This is my Milwaukee track saw. And from the factory, it has this big side opening here. They don't give you anything to cover that, and it really limits the effectiveness of the dust collection. Quick search online. Problem solved. There's a plethora of different adapters you can get for all sorts of tools to adapt to whatever vacuum system you have. Printables, Thingiverse, and MakerWorld are just 3 websites where you can download free files that have all kinds of things. Like, before you even buy a 3D printer, if you don't have one yet, just go look at those websites and see what's out there for free download. Nice little organization systems, more battery holders for tool organization. I really like this one for the screwdriver. I'm gonna print one of these and put it on one of my tool carts. Battery holders, pack out mountable battery holders. So you can just put them on the top of your pack out or your pack out vacuum. Now obviously I've committed heavily to the Milwaukee system, but whatever brand that you prefer, they've got files for you and they're free. TPU is a rubber-like filament. Little air puffers, you can clean like delicate instruments like cameras. Just to be able to print this at your own house, I mean, this is kind of cool, not mildly useful, but that is neato burrito. This is one I actually really enjoy. It's called like an engineer's tray. It's got a place for your caliper, there's a place for a ruler in the back, and then you can put little doodads and knickknacks and just kind of take this with you around the shop. Or print 2 of them like I did. I have one here, one in my office when I'm doing digital designs. And speaking of 3D design, getting a 3D printer has really pushed me to want to be able to design my own product. Not necessarily products to sell, but products that solve problems for my specific situation. Case in point, this is one of the lasers I have, and I like to engrave these challenge coins. I just 3D printed this little jig, popped them in there, centers it every time, so I can batch these things out and they're always perfect. Well, once you set it up. If you've got various forms of wall organization systems, doesn't matter what type, you'll be able to find bins that will work for yours. That's handy. Now, if you're a knife maker, you probably have seen this print. This is designed by Brian House of Housework. I'll put a link to his channel down below. But he sells a 3D file, really cheap. I ran out of filament type, so that's why it's two-tone, but check that out. That's a great way to hang your belts. Now I just need to actually hang my belts. The problem with something like this is it often will put a really tight radius in there. Sometimes with certain belts that can cause a problem. This solves that problem. Now when I was building this smoker, this is one of my pride and joys, I needed a way to make these brackets. So a little bit of design work, I could 3D print some samples, 10, 15-minute prototype, just to verify that it would work before I commit them to steel. That in itself can save you a lot of time and money. I even did it for the handles and for the stiffeners for the lid. So that right there is an example of using a 3D printer in metal fabrication. It takes a little bit of time to design. Once you get better at it, it goes quicker. But while those things are printing, you can be doing other things. So you can move on to a different part of the project, get your prototypes printed out and verify that they're gonna work. And it's just so handy. Same thing with all these organizers. I have this philosophy that I want my printers printing as much as humanly possible. I'll print organizers at night, I'll print organizers when I'm doing other things, and a 3D printer is something you can just walk away from. If you have a good one, it just keeps printing, which kind of brings me to the fact as to why I'm glad I waited in getting a 3D printer. Now, my very first experience with a 3D printer was about, I would have to say, 7 or 8 years ago. My sons got one from their school. They were allowed to take it home and play with it for a weekend, and we could not get it to do diddly squat. It was absolute rubbish. But the new printers that companies are coming out with now are absolutely amazing. Very little setup required, very little tuning and calibration if you get an automatic bed leveling system. And you really just turn it on, put the filament in, and print. Now, I chose a bambulab P1S, and I highly, highly recommend that 3D printer. We also bought my son an A1 Mini for Christmas, and it was the same thing. He plugged it in, turned it on, and started printing. And he hasn't stopped printing. Now, he's a little more interested in the little gizmos and gadgets and stuff that I'm not interested at all. But he's learning stuff. You know, he's learning how different infills affect the strength of something, how to change the wall thickness. The software that Bamboo gives you, the Bamboo Studio, is pretty incredible software, and there are a lot of parameters you can change and customize. And ultimately, I think it's actually teaching him about physical objects. Engineering type stuff, like different types of support structures, triangles, how that affects the strength and performance of a part. Honestly, I think it's educational. Now I have printed the odd non-useful thing, but look at this. This is like a little moon, super thin walls. See how thin that is? It's kind of cool. So the walls, you know, give the texture of the moon. I also printed this skull because memento mori. Knife stands for displaying different knives. And if you don't have a YouTube play button, you can just 3D print your own. Okay, I gotta show you one thing that's cool that's not 3D printed. This is like old school toys. This is a steam engine, and it actually works. I found this at a garage sale for $5 with these things. We got a little power hammer, we got a grinder, and you actually put water in here. There's a little spot underneath for a fire, and it gets hot, and it actually runs this madabra. It's really cool, and it has a whistle too. Are you indecisive? You can 3D print a decision maker. The answer is yes. Yes, you should get a 3D printer. Now, if you're kind of sort of on the fence and you're like, I don't know, I'd like a 3D printer, but if I wanted to get into my own 3D designs, what's the barrier to entry on that? I'll show you, and I'll show you one of the very first things I designed. Now, you're not going to be overly impressed, but to me, this was a huge deal because it really solved the problem. This is my sandblasting cabinet, and that is the dust extraction port. What I would do before was I would just stick the hose of my shop vac in there, and it did pretty good, but obviously it wasn't sealed. 5 minutes in Shaper 3D, I had this designed, printed it out, probably took 20 minutes, and now this goes into there. Nice snug fit, and this goes into there. No leaky. Let me show you quickly how quickly it was to design something like that hose adapter for my sandblast cabinet. I'm gonna start a screen recording here, open up Shaper 3D, and we will start a new project. So this is what it looks like when you open up Shaper 3D, and I'm gonna start the design on the top plane. So there, it orientates it to the top, and let's hit the sketch button. We're gonna start with a circle, and we're just gonna draw a circle. Now you can size this circle however you'd like. We're gonna make this one 2 inches. Also, you can switch between the units of measurement, right along here, millimeter, centimeter. I'm gonna keep it in inches. So there's our circle. Now we're gonna do a circle on the outside of that. We'll make that one 2.5 inches. Cool beans. Now we can extrude this. So we're gonna go exit sketch. We're gonna take our fingers, kind of rotate, and we're just gonna grab this outer ring and extrude it. We'll make that 3 inches. Excellent. Now we're gonna go back to sketch, and we wanna put that little shoulder on there, so we can see right here we've got the center dot. We're just gonna, oops, not a line, we're not doing a line, we're gonna do a circle again. We're gonna start at that center dot, and we'll come out 2.25 inches. Now we'll exit the sketching, and what we'll do is we'll click on that outer ring, and we can extrude that inwards, like so. There, look at that. We've basically made that hose adapter. Another thing we could do is we could put a fillet or a chamfer on these edges. So if you pull it out, you'll get a chamfer. If you push it in, you'll get a fillet. So we could do that one to the outside. If you wanted the inside, same thing. Oh yeah, look at that. That looks better than the one we made. So now that we're at this point, I can export this file. So you hit the share button, hit export, export project, and you can see all the different file types on this left-hand side. Now I use STL more than anything else, so I've starred it, so it's always at the top, but I'm not actually gonna export this because I have no reason to print it. But I will show you something cool. We're in the modeling space right now, so if we click the modeling space and go to visualization, it will actually show us this object not in like a design space. Now you notice on the right here, we've got all these different types of materials. If we want to see what this would look like in carbon fiber, you simply press on this, drag it to your part, and there you have it in carbon fiber. And we've got quite a scope of different materials. Let's check out hammered brass. So we're gonna grab this, put it on, there you go. That's what this would look like in hammered brass. Now here's something that's really cool. We can actually see what this will look like in virtual reality. Okay, so now we got to move the iPad around. It has to kind of find its space. Well, oh, look it placed it right there. I can use my finger, I can drag it around, move it around. You can come look at it from the side, even like works with the lighting. You can come over top. Look at that. Isn't that crazy? You can spin it. That is nutso. There we go. That is some pretty powerful software. I let my son play on my iPad using Shaper 3D, and in about an hour, he actually designed a Mandalorian helmet, and he's 12. Like, this is intuitive software. So in 1 week, I will have had my 3D printer for a year, and when I was thinking about getting a 3D printer, I was skeptical. I didn't know if I would actually use it. I didn't know how difficult it would be to use. I just didn't know. But I have transitioned to a 3D printing enthusiast. You can ask my wife. Digital design is something that I've kind of lagged on. I haven't been involved with it. I've always done things the old school way. And I thought I had been left behind. I thought that ship had sailed. I'll never catch up. But they're just making everything easier to use for people like me that have no skills in this field. When you add to that the thousands and thousands, the cornucopia of downloadable prints on websites like Printables, Thingiverse, MakerWorld, there's a whole bunch of them. There's dozens probably that I'm missing. But it is amazing how much printing you can do, and it's also not that expensive. A lot of people probably wonder the cost of it. Obviously, the initial purchase price is where it's gonna really hurt. Filament is not that expensive. Different parts and pieces, they don't cost that much. And in most slicer programs, they'll tell you the cost of that print. So you can make that decision. It's like, yeah, I'm not gonna waste 37 cents on that one. No chance. As far as electricity draw goes, I haven't actually tested it myself, but I heard that it's quite minimal, about having a pot of coffee on. You know, that heating element? I don't know for sure. Speaking of. My wife brought me a coffee. So the purpose of this video is just to show you some of the ways that I've used a 3D printer, and as a guy who's skeptical, I'm sold. They're fantastic. If you're on the fence, if you're thinking about getting one, you won't regret it. I can tell you that you will not regret it. It's been fantastic. I'm gonna continue to use mine. I've actually got some upcoming projects that are kind of heavily 3D print centric, so that should be fun. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day. Cheers.